FM 107.1.
Hi everyone, welcome to our mid-month bonus episode. Lots of things of interest in here for you.
Okay, well, shall we talk about fungi?
Please do.
We're not going to get specific because it is such a big world, fungi. Fungi is a kingdom in its own right.
Yes, that was news to me. They're not plants, they're not animals.
No,
they're
animals
a whole
are a
kingdom
kingdom.
of their own.
Plants are a kingdom, and fungi are a kingdom. That's how big deal fungi are. We don't tend to notice them much. We use them all the time, although we're not aware of it. Like we use fungi in yeasts, and we use fungi for, well, eating mushrooms and
Antibiotics.
penicillin. Penicillin. Such an incredible story of penicillin. Alexander Fleming discovering this mold, as the Americans like to call it. and it's that mold that you get on bread that sort of turns bluish. Have you ever kept bread that long that you've seen the blue? And
It's possible I'm familiar with the phenomenon.
Yes. Also blue cheese.
Oh, yes.
It's the same thing. These are all types of penicillin. And they produce these enzymes. And when I read the story of penicillin, I couldn't quite get my head around it. The problem with it for a long time was they couldn't make enough of it to be of any use to save human beings. But eventually they managed it. Anyhow, the fungi basically are popping up in the Highlands at the moment now. They love it wet, and autumn is the perfect time. And actually there's a little small boutique industry popping up here in the Highlands for pine mushrooms. They're actually got people coming from the city and looking for these particular quite distinctive mushrooms. They're bright orange, big and very ugly in my view, but they are edible. But don't try doing this yourself.
No, let's just jump in the middle here and say we are not wanting to encourage anyone to go out foraging. Point A, you're not supposed to take things from many of our wild areas anyway, but point B, you never know what you're
You don't
getting.
want to die,
No.
in short. But it's called the saffron milk caps, and you do see them if you go to Penrose Pine Forest, for example, you will see these big orange mushrooms.
All right.
And they're the ones, if you're not sure, well, never go near them. But I tell you, the people who really know them are Polish people.
Oh, yes.
The Polish people know mushrooms really, really well because obviously Poland's full of these pine forests. And I've got several Polish friends who are absolutely wax lyrical about this particular species, saffron milk caps. But you must be very, very careful. The fungi they're not able to make chlorophyll. They're not like a plant. So they can't make their own food. So they get their meals by using, they have thread-like filaments. They call them hyphae. Hyphae. That's Phae. And they mass together and they form these great big masses of white threads. And together it's called a mycelium. And the myceliums just move around, usually underground. They may be on wood, depends on the species, but they may be creeping on soil, creeping on wood, creeping on living trees, dead trees. And they are basically exuding enzymes and taking in nutrients. So they are looking all the time for something to feed off. And there are good ones, lots, and there are bad ones, lots. Lots of bad ones. The good ones, you might have heard about mycorrhizas.
Yes.
Mycorrhizas are very important to gum trees, and very often these fungi will form an association with the roots of gum trees. And the fungi will produce the sugars and the waters, and the plants will take up the minerals and the nutrients. So they work together. And some of them actually provide antibiotics besides penicillin. So they protect a lot of the trees from other pathogens.
Fantastic.
So they've got this thing going, which is really very, very wonderful. But on the downside, there's some very sinister fungi. Mm-hmm. I remember one in particular, and I remember where I saw it, and it was in Robertson Rainforest many moons ago. And it's a fungi, it is a number of species that invade living animals.
Oh.
They invade, the spores come out. They look like big clubs that stick up out of the soil, quite noticeable, ugly, and they put down these hyphae and they invade living animals in the soil like moths and beetles and caterpillars and spiders. And they basically feed on the tissues of the living animals.
Oh.
And I remember this chappie pulling them out of the soil, and it's long and thin, bit like a finger, but then following on from the finger is another finger, and the other finger is the larvae.
Oh,
it's truly gross.
Right.
Really gross, but fascinating. So I find that pretty sinister, actually. I know there's a lot of insects that do horrible things to each other, but that one in particular really sort of
gave you the heebie-jeebies.
It did give me the heebie-jeebies. And then there's ones called saprophytic fungi, and they're the ones that are really, really useful because they break down everything. They break down the dead plant material and the dead animals, and they provide wonderful soil, basically. So there's all of those. And also, of course, there are truffles.
Yes.
Truffles, which humans seem to be absolutely in awe
Besotted
of.
with.
Yeah, and will pay big money for. But potoroos like them too, and wallabies like them, and bandicoots and wombats. They all very much enjoy truffles. And as we know, some of those diggings are really important and part of an ecosystem. Like when the animal is digging for the truffles, they are actually moving the soil, bringing the seed up to the surface, and therefore propagating the forest. So there's many wonderful things really to be said about fungi. I mean, they are spooky because they're so different.
Yeah.
And the one thing that's always blown my mind about them is that there is a chappie in Canada, actually, and he has got a contract with the US military because some fungi can actually destroy copper, really bad chemicals.
Oh.
They can clean up oil spills and maybe nuclear waste.
Good heavens.
I know.
Oh, that's really interesting.
It's so cosmic, man. So that, fungi are mind-blowing
Amazing.
stuff.
Yeah, and we really, as Lou said, it's a kingdom and we haven't touched the surface at all.
Not at all.
So a couple of things that I would like to say as well about fungi is that, as I understand it, a fungi group is doing studies in the Robertson Rainforest because they've got such an amazing collection of fungi in there. We've got to go back sometime when we've got more than half an hour.
Yes.
And maybe with
Can we
somebody
go with them?
Yes.
Because we need them to tell us what we're looking at because there's so many.
So when you see a mushroom or a toadstool, and I should just take a little moment to say, Lou, can you tell me the difference between a mushroom and a toadstool?
You can eat a mushroom.
I was really intrigued by this because I thought I don't actually know myself.
I think I was told, but I can't remember.
Yeah, look, from what I can establish, there really isn't a particular difference. Some people believe that a mushroom is an edible version of the fruiting body of a fungi.
There you go.
And a toadstool is the inedible or the poisonous version or the toxic version. However, in the dictionary, it says a mushroom is a type of fungus, usually shaped like an umbrella, many of which are edible. A toadstool is any of several mushroom-like fungus, some of which are poisonous. So from a scientific...
It's a bit confusing, isn't it?
Exactly. Scientifically, there really is no difference between those two things.
And we should say that these manifestations, these mushrooms or toadstools, or call it what you wills, that pop out of the ground, they're just the fruiting bodies of a much, much larger organism underground.
Exactly, that's right. But if you see them around, and as Lou said, between May and July now, in this part of the world is the time to go looking for them. Lots of people are really interested in fungi and doing studies on them and so on. So record any that you find, take some photos and report them on Fungi Map Australia on iNaturalist. There's also a whole lot of information on fungimap.org.au on the web. And you know, when you're taking photos, I actually take out a little mirror with me when I go out into the bush.
What a good idea.
Pop it underneath, because the fungi people are interested in, does the fruiting body, does it have gills or is it flat? What's it like underneath? And rather than pushing over the mushy to have a look, you can put a mirror underneath and take a photo.
Yes, because you really don't want to rub your nose in the dirt trying to look underneath a toadstool to see whether it's got gills or those spongy holes.
That's right.
Yes,
that's right.
What a good idea.
So we could talk for an hour and a half on fungi, I think, and we're just scratching the surface, but we'll leave it there for now.
Such a wit.
Lou, we wanted to talk a little bit about the herons in the area. I've got a white-faced heron that's hanging around in my street at the moment. It's a beautiful, elegant bird.
Street?
Yes.
What? Is he street walking?
Is it? Yeah, yes.
Or is he going from pond to pond?
There's a little area that gets it's low and swampy in one section of the street, and it likes to spend time there, but it also likes to spend time on my neighbour's roof, checking out the scenery. So I thought that we should talk about the two local herons that we have in the Highlands.
And I do think they're so misnamed.
Yes?
I do. Like, we've got two that we really see frequently.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is called a white-faced heron.
That's the one I've got.
Yeah. And it's quite a good size. It's maybe stands about,
60 to 70 centimetres.
Centimetres high, and its wingspan is probably nearly a metre. It's grey. It's a soft grey, and
Beautiful
therefore
colour.
should be called a grey heron, in my view.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have a white face.
Yes.
And yellow legs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can't miss them, really, especially when they're flying. Because you can see those yellow legs trailing behind, these really broad wings, and a really long pointed bill. And the neck, which is usually very long and very flexible, is drawn in.
Yes,
but the
they fold it up.
The breastbone sort of sticks out, doesn't it? So it's a very distinctive shape in the sky.
And they do move around in this area quite a lot.
They move around a lot because they make their living in shallow wetlands, water, muddy estuaries, a lot in paddocks around the place here. And one way and another, they are perfectly adapted for a life in the wetlands. They have these long legs so they don't get their feathers all dirty. They have these long toes so that they don't sink into the mud. They have this long neck, which has a special hinged mechanism in the neck and the sixth vertebrae that allows them to rapidly fold and extend.
Oh, so they can shoot out their
So they
beak.
can stab that fish when they see it really fast. And they are really remarkably solitary birds when they're hunting, for the obvious reason they don't want anyone else upsetting their hunting ground, because they have to stalk very carefully, quietly through the water to find prey. And while they do eat fish, I think they take a lot of frogs and invertebrates. They take crustaceans, and they eat them whole. All the animals, they eat them whole, and then they regurgitate what they don't want to digest. So they're both like that. The second one,
Can I just say one thing about the white-faced heron
Yes, tell
that I
me.
learnt that I just thought was bizarre and interesting? They have the white face,
yes,
and apparently the shape of the white on their face and down their neck is individual. So that this is what I read.
you'd
I'd like
know-
to see it
okay,
validated,
so
but
get to know your.
you
get to
could
know your
actually, if you
heron.
took photos, you could know whether it was the same one coming back or not.
Oh
But that's just a little
no, very
bizarre, quirky
interesting.
fact. Please tell me about white-necked herons.
Well, really, white-necked herons probably could be kept as a white-necked heron, but they're really a dark. The body is dark grey, and
Yes.
the neck and the face is white.
Yep, and they're taller, aren't they, than the white-faced?
They're a bit bigger.
76 to 106 centimetres.
Right.
According to my notes
According to your bird book. Yes.
I didn't know that off by heart, I have to admit.
So they have this white down to the shoulders, basically, and then they're dark, and their legs are dark, black probably, so not yellow like with the white face. So you've got the white faced and the white
Necked.
necked, and there are two favourites. But one of the things that's special about herons is that you can imagine where they live is kind of messy, to say the least. Like they often get covered in fish slime and mud, and yet they always looked absolutely, they turned out beautifully.
That's true, yeah.
And the reason they're able to stay so beautiful is they use this thing called powder down. And what it is, they preen and they take crumbled feather butts, if you like, from different parts of their body. They can take them from the chest, they can take them from the rump, and they're broken down and they make a kind of talcum powder. And they run this talcum powder through all their feathers as they preen. And they do it very, very, very carefully so that they look absolutely pristine all the time. And they've got a special hook, I think, on their middle claw that they use to comb through their feathers.
Oh, wow.
How cool
Again,
is that?
as always, Louise is gesturing beautifully to go along with this.
And the other thing that I think is interesting is how they nest.
Oh, tell me about that.
Where would you expect a heron to nest?
Oh, the trouble is I know the answer to
Oh,
this
well,
one.
that's cheating then. Okay, they nest in trees, living
Yeah,
trees.
really high.
Really high, and given
Yeah.
their long legs, they can look kind of bizarre up there. And they make a twig nest, very untidy, unlike their own personal hygiene. Their nests are
Yes.
just messy, really, and they usually sometimes they nest in colonies.
Oh, yes, the white-necked especially, I think.
And sometimes they nest alone, but I am used to seeing them in colonies.
Wow.
And they call those heronries, don't they?
Oh.
Heronries.
Heronries.
Yeah. They can produce, I think, one family, one set a year of young. But there's no specific season. Their breeding season is dictated by water, by how much rain there is, and therefore how many fish, frogs, invertebrates, and so forth, food there is for their chicks. So that is kind of interesting that
Yeah.
they can breed
Do
at
it
any time.
when it suits.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand that the white-necked herons have to have fresh water, whereas the white-faced herons are much more Catholic with the quality and
I think they
of
can manage
water.
more brackish water. I mean, they
and
don't like.
salty. Yes, which
Don't
is
think
brackish. isn't it?
they're keen on the coast.
Yeah.
But brackish water, an estuarine sort of environment is very nice. And frankly, herons must be really pleased that fashion for hats with all those heron feathers has passed.
Yes.
Hopefully forever.
Yes. So I think I could say that I see white-faced herons quite a lot around the place. But I went through my photos to see where I'd seen white-necked herons, and the only ones that I've photographed in the Highlands were actually at Thirlmere Lakes. Can you think of where you've seen white-necked herons in our area?
I have seen them flying around in my neck of the wood. They aren't as common.
No, by no means.
And I did try and find some distinctions between these two, because it's unusual to have two birds so similar in the same habitat. Usually there's some kind of division of habitats between birds that are hunting in the same
thing.
area. And I couldn't find any research that informed me about that.
Oh, well, there you go. Lou, you tell me that this is the time of year that insects are going to be laying eggs.
Well, yes, the temperatures are dropping and daylight hours are diminishing here in the Highlands. So there is a bit of not a rush on, but there is something to consider that is coming our way, and that is winter. And winter, as we know in the Highlands, can be really quite cold. So with insects, they're enjoying the middle of the day when it's warm. But to think about the next generation, they're going to have some kind of strategy to make sure that they're going to make it through that cold winter. And I've been watching, and I think you've been watching, butterflies laying their eggs on larval food plants, haven't you?
I've been hearing about it more than seeing it. I'd like to be seeing it more in my garden.
Have you got you've got a lemon tree?
No.
Well, get a lemon tree, because if you get a lemon tree, you can watch that butterfly that only as a citrus butterfly that lays her eggs on citrus trees.
So I'm going to interrupt you and ask, if I wanted to put in natives, if I put in the native finger lime, would that work?
Well, I've got a finger lime, and I have seen them growing in the Highlands, in people's gardens.
But I could see a buttercup.
If I was a citrus butterfly, I would think it was a pretty poor kind of a location.
I've got to go with the exotic lemon.
Yeah, I think so.
Please continue.
Okay. All right. So those butterflies are actually laying eggs. If you watch them, they go round and round your lemon tree, and she lays one egg. And then she flies around a bit more and she lays one egg and one egg and one egg. Not all insects lay their eggs one by one. Some lay them in clusters. And some insects don't actually need to lay eggs at all for winter. They can just crawl into hollows or logs as adults, and they can remain inactive through the winter months. And they undergo a sort of metabolic slowdown, which we call diapause. It's when the animal is still alive but is not feeding, it's just living quietly.
You're right. I remember that the common brown butterfly, the female, does that through the winter and waits to lay her eggs.
Hangs in there, but nothing's much going on. They're just ticking on. And some of the large wasps, they can just shelter in eaves and attics of houses and in barns. And then there are the mayflies and the dragonflies, the stoneflies, and those nymphs, not the adults, but the nymphs, they can stay underwater and feeding all winter, even with ice on the top.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's not necessary for every insect to lay eggs. And the bees, of course, they can stay in a hive, and the ants can stay in their nests, and they can overwinter that way, and they form clusters. The honeybees, actually, they do a thing with their wings. The wing muscles flap so that they can raise the heat. It keeps them more active inside the hive.
Oh.
They've also got stored honey during the winter, which makes them possible for them to continue to be semi-active. So one way and another, the honeybees can actually produce both fertilized and unfertilized eggs during winter.
Oh, right.
There are a few insects that actually give birth to live young.
Oh, Oh, tell me about that.
Aphids. They are famously known for giving birth to live young. And cockroaches do have egg cases. I'm sure we've all seen the egg cases, or the ootheca, as it's known, sticking out the back of a cockroach. You have seen that, haven't you?
I don't.
Oh no,
I don't know that I have. It's possible that I haven't looked at them.
You've not
quite
lived
that
in
intimately.
Sydney, have you?
No, I am not from Sydney.
If you lived in Sydney, you would have seen these egg cases sticking out the back of a cockroach. It's not a pretty sight. No. And a lot of them do drop that egg case. But in some cases, they actually retain it in the abdomen until the very moment when it's going to hatch.
Oh, right.
So it's not an absolute given. Insects have so much diversity in the way they do everything. But the cockroach usually leaves an egg case. And sometimes beetles keep eggs inside and give birth to live larvae.
Oh, wow.
Not all, but most lay eggs, but some beetles do. So for those who must lay eggs, and then they must, of course, protect them, they come in all shapes, colours and sizes. And if you look at them under microscopes, or you look at them online, which is easier, you will see that some of them are really weird and wonderful. Bright colours, fancy kind of shapes, star shapes, and all sorts of different things. So some insects, like termites, just drop their eggs. They just
onto
drop
the soil.
Nah, they just drop them.
Wherever.
Right. Yeah. But most have to be protected from dehydrating and also from predators, of course. So most stick them to leaves or drop them into the forest floor or lay them in water, or some of them, rather disgustingly, lay their eggs in other insects.
Right.
We have talked about some of those habits. And the parasitic wasp, it's called ichneumon. They actually have a huge ovipositor, a thing out the back, and it's twice the size of their body. And they can actually drill down into wood and deposit the eggs into the soil. So that's quite common, actually, to lay eggs in soil. And lacewings, the eggs are like little necklaces. Very often of a beam of wood or something, you'll see a necklace. Or other species of lacewings, they have a long spike, a white thread, really, not a spike. And then just at the end, they've got this little white egg.
Yes, that
and
I've
they're
seen.
all lined up together.
Yeah, beautifully. Apparently so that they're harder for the ants to access.
Ah, yes. Well, this is interesting because ants have a big role to play in insects' eggs. But I want to talk about the praying mantis. Have you ever seen that egg case?
Yes.
It's weird. It's like a Chinese lantern. It's oval shaped and it's sort of papery. 25 mils high and a baby 10, 12 mils wide. And it's papery and pale yellow.
Light. Yes.
And it feels really light.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? And
it's an amazing thing.
And it just hangs off a stalk of anything. Quite remarkable. And you've probably seen spittle bugs spit. You've seen spit on leaves, sometimes grass stalks and things, haven't you? Spit.
No.
It just looks like you spat on it.
No, I can't say I've seen that.
Well, it's very common. Very common. And that, again, it's a froth. It's produced by a sap-sucking insect. They're called frog hoppers. And they use the froth to shield them from predators and also to keep them hydrated.
Oh, right.
Because, of course, eggs will dry out if they're just stuck out on a stalk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I think that'll do us for now.
I could go on.
I'm getting that impression. Okay, we'll see you again in May. Bye.
Bye now.